Hello, my name is Nicholas Francis, and myself, alongside Dr. Stockton Maxwell of the Geospatial Science Department at Radford University, did this project on dendrochronology in Southwest Virginia. Here's a little bit of background about dendrochronology, or tree ring analysis, before we get into the main part of my project. Dendrochronologists study and analyze specific patterns recorded in the trees over the time. But by doing this, we can also begin to understand historical patterns in the environment. As trees begin to mature, the growth slows down and becomes more sensitive to forest disturbance and changes in climate. You see, when a tree is young, it does everything in its power to get established, so it grows as fast as possible. And it doesn't really respond as much to changes. But like I said, as it matures and gets older, it becomes more sensitive to these changes. And these are affected and shown in the width of the annual growth rings. The eastern hemlock is the sample species for this particular analysis. We collected these samples in the Jefferson National Forest just outside of Big Stone Gap, Virginia. There were 2 core samples collected per tree from 23 trees with an increment borer, so a total of 46 samples. And an increment borer is kind of a hollow drill bit that you basically screw into the tree and then take this core sample out on a little tray. Then that sample is mounted onto a raft that it can be handled with, sanded with increasingly fine grit sandpaper to a near polished finish, and then scanned into a computer image at an extremely high resolution. These samples are then opened in the coup recorder software by Cybus Incorporated to create a measurement time series. And these are basically annual or ring width files per ring, so per year, per sample. So as you can see in figure 6, we mark each ring of each sample and have those saved. After that, we then dated the samples using the XDater app. So it takes these ring width files, compares them with one another, and makes sure that they all match correlations with one another. So say, for example, if a tree died in 2008, but the tree that we're comparing it to died in 2007, we're able to figure that out when we cross-date these samples with each other. So that way we can get the ending year correct. So that way the chronology is also correct. After the samples are dated, we put them all together into a master chronology for the specific site in the Jefferson National Forest. So Roaring Branch is this specific site. We then analyze this chronology by correlating the annual ring width to monthly climate data from the PRISM climate group and make inferences as to how these trees responded to different climate patterns in the past. As you can see in figure 4, these correlations between monthly maximum temperature and tree ring width from the previous growing season May to the current October. These trees responded to both growing and dormant season temperature, but in opposite directions. So in October, January, and February of the dormant season, for example, you can see that there's a strong correlation between maximum monthly temperature and high growth in the season after the warmer winter. And then in figure 5, you can see the correlations between monthly precipitation and tree ring width from the previous growing season May to the current October. So the same extent. The trees did not respond to changes in precipitation, which surprised me. I would expect precipitation to be one of the main factors in how trees grow, but evidently not. As you can see in this graph, the trees did not respond to changes in precipitation. The 2 charts in the middle represent kind of ring width growth per tree and for the chronology. So figure 2, the one on top, shows the ring width index, which is the dark gray line that goes all over the place, representing high growth years and low growth years. So the parts of the line that are above 1 represent a large growth year, and the parts of the line that are below 1 represent a small growth year, or below average. And then the red line represents the decadal changes in ring width growth. So you can see in between 1850 and 1900, there is a small dip in growth. So that was a slightly worse growing season than, say, for example, between 1900 and 1950. And the shaded in gray area for this section shows the sample depth, or the number of cores that we were able to use for that part of the chronology. So you can see right near 1950, we had all 46 samples available to use, and it drops off as you go farther in the past. But something that doesn't always happen, it drops off as you get closer to the present as well. The reason for this is because the hemlock woolly adelgid killed a lot of these trees over time. So they were cored, the samples were taken in 2018, but the tree may have died prior to 2018. And that's something we had to figure out in the cross-dater app, or the XDater app, when we cross-dated these samples with one another, is when the tree died, so we could accurately represent when this tree actually was, where it took part in this chronology. And then in figure 3, it's a spaghetti plot that shows the growth curve for each tree core sample in the site chronology. So for each tree, each year, it has their growth line. And as you can see, between 1900 and 1950, it's really noisy. It's something similar in 2000, where there's just a lot of interference in the data. So one thing we did was ran a couple of statistical analyses to kind of take out the forest disturbance noise to hone the signal for the climate data that we were actually looking at for our analysis. The main takeaway for this project was that old growth eastern hemlock trees in Southwest Virginia respond to changes in temperature, but not precipitation, over the past century. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and I would like to thank the Hours Office and the Highlander Research Rookies, as well as Dr. Wergo and Dr. Pate for their support and continued help with this research project. Have a good day.